Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the UCLA YNS Nazarian Center for Israel Studies and co-sponsored by the UCLA Center for Near Eastern Studies. I'm Maura Resnick, the Executive Director of the Nazarian Center, and I'm so pleased to be hosting this retrospective on the work of Dan Reisinger, Israel's most influential and prolific designer, a multifaceted and internationally renowned artist who designed logos, posters, stamps, medals, packaging, letterhead, interior design, and more over his long career. In 1998, Reisinger was awarded the Israel Prize, the country's highest honor, for, quote, imprinting his mark on the visual language of Israel. We have guests from across the US, Israel, and around the globe, so thank you all for joining us. Now let me introduce our speakers. Dr. Ilan Reisinger received his PhD from Bar-Ilan University, focusing on visual language in terms of the philosophy of language, all while working alongside his father, Dan Reisinger. Ilan currently manages the Dan Reisinger Design Estate, and he's pursuing the establishment of a permanent study center for the unique Reisinger Design Collection for the benefit of design students, researchers, and the general public. Professor Terry Schroyer is a professor of graphic design and visual communication at the NBSD, the Neri Bloomfield School of Design and Education in Haifa, Israel. She has worked, taught, lectured, curated, and led curricula at the Academy for the past 30 years. As a design professional, she worked for many years leading projects for prominent international clients such as IBM, the Russian Hermitage Museum, UPS, Bloomingdale's, and the Conran Shop, and for the Israel Supreme Court. In 2020, she was appointed head of the Department of Graphic Design, Visual, and Digital Communications at NBSD, a position she held for 13 years. In parallel, she's been a visiting professor at the Middle East Technical University in Ankara, Turkey, and at the Technion in Haifa, Israel. Professor Schroyer, the first woman professor of graphic design and visual communication in Israel, is a recipient of numerous design awards in Israel and abroad, and a sought-after judge in many design competitions. Ilan will first talk a bit about his father's family background and early years in Israel, and then Terry will join him for a conversation on some of the designs you will see and on the evolution of Dan Reisinger's work. After the presentation, there'll be some time for Q&A, so please type your questions into the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So without further ado, Ilan, the floor is yours.
Thank you for hosting us and for this beautiful introduction. Hi, Terry. It's good to see you.
Hi.
Having you
Hi, and
aboard.
thank you. And thank you from me too.
Sure. So as you said, without further ado, we have plenty to show you and talk about. So let's just start the show. So my dad, Dan Reisinger, was born in Yugoslavia, today Serbia, in a small town called Kanija. He was born in 1934. And as so many families and communities there, they had a beautiful childhood. That's the town hall. And that's his rendering of the city hall some years later. His parents, he had according to his memories, very nice childhood. Very quiet, pretty ordinary. His father was an artist too. There he is next to his father and his grandmother. His father was also an artist. His father here, with his brothers, had a decoration company. They worked throughout the Balkans, all the way down to Greece, doing manor houses, city halls. So he was brought up around color and around work with color. It goes all the way to his grandfather. They established a company the name of the company was Colorit. So they were kind of in a big business in a way in those terms. They worked a lot in Belgrade. So they had a beautiful, very organized and pretty lovely childhood. During winters, when it was too cold to work, his father used to do small paintings at home. It's an oil painting back from 1915, I think. Pastel. And tiny little aquarelles. You can see here how small it is. But he grew up around color. You could see the delicacy and the sensitivity his father had for pigments and the use of color. Well, all this came to an end, an abrupt end with the war. So his father was taken, Hungary took over that part of Serbia. The north part of Serbia is Vojvodina. And his father was taken to work labor camps, work labor units, and he was sent off to the Eastern Front, somewhere in the Ukraine, where he perished. He didn't return from the war. Same with the rest of the community and the rest of his family. His grandmother, his father's brothers. And then, so he was hidden at the time. He was hidden by local Serbian families, him and his mother. And in 1949, whatever was left from the community all made a communal and joint aliyah to Israel. There he is at 15, coming to Israel in a Teudat Aliyah, middle of summer. So from a very kind of bourgeois and professional life, they come to like tens and hundreds of thousands to Machanot Olim, to the tents, to the heat, to Israel. But nevertheless, he was very enthusiastic about it, to come to his own country. So these are pretty much the condition they all joined together with other Olim from all over the world. During that period, he was still painting. First of all, he was working as a painter, house painter. Whatever he learned from his uncles, from the workers that worked with his dad about pigments and paint was irrelevant in Israel because they used very plain materials. But nevertheless, that was the call of the time, and they went out to work. And while this time, he too continued working and painting and doing his own drawings. And one morning, while they were at work, he was hanging his paint somewhere around those, like where people hang their clothes. He was hanging sheets of paper to dry. And a committee from Jerusalem came by to the camp and asked his mother, who's doing these paintings? So she told him about her son, about my dad. And he told her she should send him to Jerusalem because there's an art school there. He should go there. And he did. He went to Bezalel and he was accepted to study there as the youngest student in Bezalel at the age of 16. And following him, the family moved to Jerusalem. That's my dad at the time, his mother, who remarried to another survivor who lost his family. And as it were at the times, people gathered together to create new families, a new start, a new beginning, recollecting whatever they had from the past, but having a new vision, a new call to come to Israel. So at the age of 16, he's accepted to the Bezalel Academy in Jerusalem. He talked some Russian, he talked a little bit of Hebrew, whatever he could, and that was his start. They lived in Talpiot, right at the edge of then the city, right after next to their house, at the edge of the yard was already the border, and after that, the desert. Jerusalem was at times, very cold placed, but the desert and the colors of the desert and the sun reflecting from the mountain across Jordan reflected heat, reflected a beautiful sense of openness and warmth. Here you see some very early sketches, probably from that time and that place. We'll get back to that later. He would cycle down from Talpiot down to the valley and then hold on to a truck that led him all the way to Bezalel in the city center. There he studied color compositions. These documents are now in the archive of the National Library in Jerusalem. Here we see a drawing of the city. It's a sketch for a class in woodcut printing with the famous Professor Steinhardt. So here you see the sketch. Here we see the final work. And my dad was very particular and meticulous about work and about order. Here you see he kept the plate. And for the safekeeping and the future, this is at the National Library in Jerusalem. Apparently, he wasn't a very good student, either as a Ole Hadash, a newcomer, but his end of the year report said he could do better. Whatever he lacked in language, maybe he had an enthusiasm and a will to work and to excel. Here we see him with other students in Bezalel. And here one of his friends sketched him. That's him in the back. Yossi Stern was a colleague in the school. He painted this. He drew this drawing from a class in Bezalel. And he did excel. For a competition under the theme From Town to Village, he made this poster, which was noted and got rewarded. And I think, Terry, we have something to compliment about it.
Hi everyone.
Terry, I just want to add, and this poster was included in the Hebrew Encyclopedia a few years later, along with other posters of the time made in Bezalel.
What I'd like to add about this poster is, even though we all know, who knows Dan's work, that he developed his own style very, very quickly, here he is still influenced by the pioneers, by the really, really early comers like Otto Wallisch and the brothers Shamir and Rudi Dayan, who are names of very early graphic designers who came, they all came from Europe, and they came before the establishment of Israel. So here is still influenced by them, because some of them were his teachers. So this is why we can see like something some kind of resemblance to this style. Very, very clean and modest, and a bit very, very naive, and even a bit childish in a way. Thank you, thank you, Ilan.
Sure. You mentioned Dayan. These were all made in Dayan's class in Bezalel.
Yes.
So he certainly was like trying probably to kind of fit in, to get into the mood.
Yes.
Here we see a sketch of that same poster and a letter from Steinhardt, and I'm telling him that he won the very prestigious Struck Award in Bezalel. I hope you can read it. And that certainly gave him a boost. That was a wonderful acknowledgement of his talents. Here from a paper clip from that period, you see that poster along with other posters of the same theme. And it says here, students in Bezalel in poster design class. So the poster was there right from the start. It was obviously a very prominent, very important tool in advertising, in public relations. Here's the first attempt of my dad to say something kind of on more, let's say, a national level. It's his, he applied for the Independence Day official poster. So you can see already the willingness and the aspiration to say something significant about society, about life in Israel. It starts with the idea. It says here, Benjamin Zev Herzl, that's his book Altneuland. And out from the idea, out of the book, out of the words, comes reality with that movement upwards. Im tirzu, said Herzl, ein zo agada, if you wish for it, if you will, it will happen. And obviously the symbol of statehood. After Bezalel, he goes to the army. He's in the Air Force doing small publications. And occasionally you can still see here, as you said, the kind of the humoristic, the naive approach to what was then pretty popular theme in media and medium of transferring messages, a national shooting competition. So obviously you get that, right? And then in a more kind of structured and more constructive approach, the army maneuvers, the poster for the army maneuvers. During the army.
And again, these are very, very different to other work of Dan, because these are like less minimal and less geometric, as we'll see later on in his later work.
Well, they're coming up pretty soon. During his army service, he asked for 2 weeks leave to attend a very important occasion. The world famous Abraham Gaines, British designer, comes to Israel to teach a class in photogravure technique to make stamps. And he's, again, probably the youngest attendant with very established designers, wishes to go to this class to learn more. Abraham Gaines instructed the students how to make it, and then each one had to make the exact copy of Games's design for stamps. Abraham Gaines did a lot of stamps for the Israel Post Office at the time, and by the end of the class, he told my dad, well, after the army, you should consider coming to London. If you do, please let me know, contact me. The army asked Dan to stay, but he told his commanders he had better ideas. He wants to go to London. But on his way to London, he made a stop over in Brussels. He was told there was a huge event there, the World Expo, which was probably maybe if not the first, it was the most major expo event after World War II. All nations brought their best in culture, in technology, and it was as if the world came together in one place. United States, Russia, Europe, all over the world. And he went there because he thought that would be interesting. And it was a crucial point, a crucial event in his further career. He finds work there. in the Commission General of the Expo, and he makes small publications, as you see here, about science, the future. Future was very optimistic at the time. The atom had a lot of promise for mankind. And then he works to more work for the Israel Pavilion and other publications. You see here still the naive. This is an article about the Israel Pavilion of the exhibition. Israel is still depicted in a very traditional way, the kibbutz probably. It's not a camel, it's a donkey, but nevertheless. And then here you see a New Year greeting from the Israel Pavilion. Now we'll just bear this in mind, this part here, and we will see it in other forms later.
Motif
Yes,
that will appear again.
And then he was told there was a competition about the science pavilion of the entire expo. And he dares to participate. He dares and he wins first prize for the International Science Pavilion. And that's already a whole new level of achievement.
Yeah, but it's a whole new approach from what we saw before, because it's starts to be more minimalist and conceptual, less illustrative, like examples we saw before, and of course, like the teachers of Bezalel, the pioneers we were talking about. Here, Dan
Sure,
become the conceptual artist that we know. We know him so well for being such.
He later contemplated how do you manifest ideas like atoms moving and electrons and particles. So that was his take on it, and it made an effect. How do you visualize not very literal ideas, more abstract ideas?
Abstract ideas, yes.
Yeah. This is the president of Israel, Ben Tzvi, in a visit to the pavilion. And there's the poster in the background, so he can see his work all around the exhibition ground. That's him in Brussels. You see the poster, some of the other works there. And from Brussels, he makes his way to London. His former professor, his former teacher, Abraham Games, introduced him to the British Post Office. And he already has a nice portfolio, and he works there. He does some posters. Somebody would love a telegram. I mean, today it'll be considered an emoji, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real leap.
I think that here we can see a beginning of his unusual use of color, because he was like the best colorist ever. So I think here we can start seeing it, and not these dull colors of the beginning of Israel.
Well, the idea of radiating, or how you call it, transmitting airwaves, have this this visual transmission of movement due to the color contrast. In London, he has his first art exhibition at the Ben Uri Gallery. And in London, there's another important occasion, where he meets my mother. And they get married there. And since he was on his own in London, Abraham Games was his best man for the wedding. And friendship lasted for many years thereafter. And after London starts basically the lifelong career in Tel Aviv, Israel. gets a commission to work at the Near East International Fair in Tel Aviv, which is kind of a smaller smaller scale of the expo, basically. The International Fair in Tel Aviv starts in the 30s, and then it stopped, and then they reintroduced it in Tel Aviv. New fairground, bringing countries from around the world, and you can see here the influence of what he saw probably in Brussels, the color, the idea of presenting the whole occasion, the whole idea of what's happening in a very total modern way. Here's the old version of the logo of the Near East Fair. You can see it very illustrative, and there's a modern version for it.
He was the master of geometric shapes and minimalism, so you can start to see it here. The translation is very, very, it's demonstrating.
The work didn't amount just to a symbol or a logo or a poster. Here's another version. Very dynamic. You see the winged camel is already leaping forward. But then he treated the event not as a way to make a symbol or a poster. Everything had to have some kind of attention to it. How the public comes. There's, you see the brochure, the program, a newsletter at the time, a stamp, and then an envelope for the stamp. They all were treated as part of the bigger message of what's happening in that event. Here you see, I don't think I ever saw somebody translating the word news in such a way where the N-E-W-S point to the direction north, east, west, south. And that's where news come from, I guess. Another poster, even more free, more colorful. The fairground was probably trying to be festive, but here there's a way of seeing his overall vision for the environment in general. The environment of Israel, the environment of a new and vibrant country. Here you see the detail of that poster. Specifically, these were the fairgrounds, but that's a vision for the entire country for a future. And here's a first sample of how he translates this vision into reality. Moon Valley Hotel Eilat. So there are prefabricated concrete housing, concrete, I guess, and then you can get pretty much lost finding your own room here. But he comes with this fantastic idea of how to navigate, how to organize your way and know your way around this village. So each pathway receives its own color, and then in the middle of the desert, you have this kind of blooming surroundings of color.
And it's nice to see how it's environmental work and the 3D work matches his printed matter. Like everything matches. Everything is connected by shapes and colors and geometric shapes.
In some of my dad's lectures, let's say, or talking to students, things would be divided into like environmental, color, whatever, logos. But during this talk, when you also speak about a little bit about his life story, about his childhood and coming to Israel, things mesh together. I mean, we could talk about each subject separately, but they kind of layers that intertwine with each other. Another color work. This is pretty much Tel Aviv in the 1970s, the beachfront of Tel Aviv, pretty run down and not very different from the black and white photo here. And then he was asked by the municipality to suggest which color the benches should be. So he said, he walks down there, he goes, he said, well, forget about the benches, just paint everything white and I'll give you an idea what to make with this promenade. And he goes and makes some sketches. And he doesn't paint the benches, he paints everything. And he goes back to the mayor and he said, pretty much, it's fantastic, go for it. And they do. They didn't have the right colors at the time, so you had to go to the paint company to produce the specific hues and tones that he wanted for this project. And there it is. Sketches and the way it came about. They made their way to a cover of Art in Tel Aviv book. These sketches and other works are now kept and part of the Pompidou Architecture Archives. Air separation factory in the Negev. The people who invested money in this project came from France, and they were amazed to see at that time in the late 70s, the Center Pompidou was just built, and they were amazed to see the same idea in the middle of the desert in Israel. Another environmental and corporate work, we touch logos, the Delek company, fuel stations. Also a very simple solution for a variety of types of buildings and stations all over the country.
Ilan, I just want to add something about the use of type in Dan's work. He didn't use like specific typefaces who were already existing and in use in Israel, like Hadassah and Frankville. They were designed in 1958 and 1932, but he created his own type by shapes. It wasn't a type like all the alphabet, just the letters, not only for logos, but also for every purpose. He just built the words from shapes, and he didn't bother to create the whole alphabet. And you can see it in the shapes of the Carmelit. I just want to add something about the Carmelit. This project is in Haifa. This is where I'm from. And it's the first and the only, at the moment, underground in Israel. And it was designed, what year, Ilan? Sorry? When was it designed?
1993.
Okay, and it's still in use, it's still there, it's kept perfectly, and it's really, there are not many reasons to come to Haifa, but this is one of them.
Well, when I showed you before his words, the primary and secondary colors in my works are my attempt to create a clear, bright, and joyful expression of life in Israel. So I think that pretty much illustrates that. He didn't want to make Israel just beautiful inside. He wants to project Israel's image also outside. And here's a poster about Israel about the anniversary of Israel. And here's a new kind of vision of colorful, almost abstract, but very optimistic way of looking at life in a modern day Israel. And here's Terry, here's like a sample of the odor.
This is a poster designed in the 1950s by Rothschild Lippmann, and you can see the difference because Dan's approach is more secular and like very vivid, and Lippmann's approach is like a bit more like motifs of religion, and Jerusalem is demonstrated in an entirely different way. So this is the difference Dan brought with his very fresh work, because he was, I think, in a way, the gate. He opened the gate of Israel to very modern design. He was influenced from design from London, of course, and from Japan and from Europe. So I think the former screen demonstrates very clearly the difference between like traditional designers in Israel and Dan's work. Thank you.
Israel was still projected either as religion or kibbutz. These were
Yes.
the pretty much options. Israel,
Yes.
kibbutz, oranges. Another twist on the same idea of pilgrimage to Israel. Still very clear cut with a touch of suggested archaeological sites in Israel. Later on, I think much later on, they had the iCloud use. If any of you remember, titles started with this kind of idea of work. It's another attempt of combining the old ideas, but in a very modern way of articulating it. This is a calendar, an early work for my dad with El Al, where he produced a calendar in 1963. The idea here is to show the layers of time layers in the history of Israel coming up to recent years. So each page has a cutout showing colors and of the previous page. Each page has a cutout showing the previous page, which is an analogy to the layers of archaeology in Israel, coming up to modern day Israel. And again, the future, the current Israel is a city, is vibrant, is alive, nothing to do with the old. You can see the old, it's layered down under, but you approach the present and the future. Here's another way of proclaiming Israel. Bloomingdale's, Israel Week in Bloomingdale's. Israel is the dream. So again, Jerusalem as a focal point, peace, and Jerusalem here is not Christian, Jewish, Arab.
Not
it's
religious.
World. And again, the colors, the motifs return, and they come back in all kinds of, wherever the visitor, the customer in Bloomingdale comes across it, he meets Israel in a joyful, in a suggestive way. At the time, that's another, I think it was very well known in Europe, I think. Israel produce, again, they project color, a sense of optimism, the Carmel produce. Israel Design Center, exhibition in Stuttgart. So Israel has nothing to do with no camels, no sun, or
No war.
Jerusalem.
No
Completely
war.
abstract. No war. It's an idea. It's a concept translated through color, movement, transparency, a bit of mystic. What's going on, which makes engagement with the viewer. He's trying to figure out what is moving here and what's under, what's above. So that transmits an idea of projecting a vision or an idea. Israel Fashion Week. And maybe one of the major works that is synonymous with Israel is El Al. Here's a poster for El Al for introducing the new 747 jumbo jet. When it arrived to Israel, a little bit about it has a lot of subject to talk about, but it starts with the logo of El Al. Here is the old logo. You see it was divided into Hebrew and English. And the square is, well, it's not very dynamic shape, I guess. So my dad back at the time, even when he did the calendar, he had the idea of combining the letters.
For an Israeli designer, it's one of the hardest challenges to combine Hebrew and Latin. And I think this is one of the iconic examples of this combination, really.
He says, the integrated Hebrew-Latin logo with its two-way readability presents an image of a bridge between cultures and transforms the national to an international visual communication. So the Hebrew stands out, it flies everywhere. Obviously the colors of the plane, it was important to show the flag, the colors of the nation, the type of the nation, the language, and it's completely combined and it's integrated into the international scene. So that's outside the livery, the plane livery. He gets to do the ground equipment, the interiors, and that's another way of introducing Israel. You enter an airplane, which at the time still is, it's gray, it's cold, and the company wanted to say, once you arrive to El Al, you arrive to Israel. So we see here the color he associated with his days in Jerusalem, looking at the desert. So it's the browns, the pinks, the reds, giving warmth into the interior of the plane. Working on a mural in the front of the plane, a sketch. Later on, these murals keep the coloring for carpets inside the planes. Tickets. We don't have tickets anymore, but these airplane tickets have quotes from the Bible. Later on in the 90s, the company wants to cool down the atmosphere. No more warm reds. They rather people sit quietly in the airplane and sleep rather than get too warm up with the reds and the pinks. And at that point, El Al, being the national carrier, gets the flag to be part of its logotype. And of course, part of El Al work are the iconic posters for El Al destinations.
These are really, this is an iconic work, and I've been teaching for many, many years, and every time I present my first lecture to first year students, first of all, I not only mention Dan, but I dedicate a chapter to Dan's work, but this is something I keep showing one year after the other, because I think this is a wonderful example of his work and of graphic designer's work, to say so much in so little words or shapes, or rather shapes. I think it's really genius work, really.
Thanks, dear. I have a eye here on the clock. I think we need to kind of move forward. About the Hebrew letter. The Hebrew letter is an enduring manifestation of visual expression in Jewish Hebrew culture. Back in Bezalel, he works on the classic way of Hebrew type, Hebrew calligraphy that is, or it comes from the new findings, archaeological findings of the scrolls. Here you mentioned other types, traditional types in Hebrew at the time, but
yes,
my dad keeps exploring the shape of the letter to make, for whatever new project, almost a new lettering.
yeah.
And he
Like,
doesn't approach it in a typographic way. The shape of the letter.
Just the shape, really, not a typographic, not scientific.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he said that too.
Mm-hmm.
Chaim, life. The two yod together suggest the life. Another combination of Hebrew letters. There's the bet and the lamed here. It's national social security, but it's not only national in the shape of menorah, it suggests security with the shape of a home here.
Mm-hmm.
Botanical Gardens. The Hebrew letters
became plants,
are stylized, and then there's no problem to mirror them against each other to create the leaf for the gardens. I won't get into each of them because we need to, but this type of visual and shape form of the Hebrew letter, I think, was particular interest to the Chinese when they published a book about his entire work in the Tsinghua University, a monograph about his work.
Each
Probably with
logo
Chinese
really
lettering, it was a particular interest for them.
Yeah.
Here's again the Hebrew and the English, the Latin, and then they come together in a formalized way, integrated way. It also had a sense of purpose to do this. Israel's new companies were expanding, had to deal with both local and international markets, and that was important for business too. And there's no better example than the Teva, pharmaceutical giant. Obviously, it worked for them pretty well until they changed the logo, and I think they are going down. Iskar. Those calendars reflect the matter of business of Iskar, which is cutting tools. So the paper cuts,
blades,
reflect the idea of their business, and they were sent all over the world, and people were participating to receive them each year to see what new trick, what new technology either the calendar suggests and Iskar is coming through. In each one, the design has something to do with the technology advancement of the company, which was later bought by Berkshire Hathaway. So here's about the integrated logos and logo types of other companies, some we mentioned. There's a particular one here about the Saba, which I personally like. The Saba turns into the fruit of the Saba. My dad, I told you, is in the Air Force. He always liked the Air Force. Very proud to see his logo on the Lavi Israel airplane. Habima. It's a play on the Hebrew letter Hey. Turns into a menorah.
And it reflects the shape of the whole, really.
Of the building.
Yes.
And it comes around in various occasions within the interior. Has to do with the theater, some theater posters. We won't get into them. Julius Caesar. beautiful sketches. West Side Story kind of came back just recently. Cultural events like a dance company. How do you visualize a dance? So with a few brush strokes, he does a poster for the Batsheva Dance Company, and along those lines and this idea and this expression, he makes a logo for a dance company. This use of brush to express something, say something, to have that personal touch. You saw some of the other logos, very hard edge cut, but there are various techniques to express an idea. Another brush work. This symbol for the signing ceremony of peace between Israel and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Was used for Yitzhak Rabin New Year greeting card. Another type of symbol, the army medals, the IDF army medals. Medal of distinction, the idea of excellence with some kind of moral value in conduct is represented in the round shape and the blue color of the skies. Courage, naturally red, and the arms suggest the menorah. But then the highest medal is the Medal of Valor, which is very significant because my dad suggested the color yellow and the Magen David. And the yellow Magen David was a sign of degradation for Jews throughout the centuries, certainly in the Holocaust. So in Israel, he turns that idea upside down. And the yellow Magen David is a sign of the highest recognition, the highest achievement and pride of the nation on a very few individuals who received this medal.
And it's nice to see how the modern approach really exists in the medals too, because medals are usually more traditional and decorated, and Dan's modern approach is very, very visible in these medals too.
You see him in the studio with the models and working and sketches on this project. He later on associated his life story, his biography, with these three colors. The yellow being the life in Europe under occupation under the Nazis, the yellow star, the red for the Red Army who liberated him, and the blue for the new life under the blue skies of Israel. Terry, I think we should kind of rush through a little bit. Is that okay?
I'm only listening to you, but
here's another comparison between the old and the new.
Yes, and the old really always glorifies the new Israeli, and like recruiting everyone to go forward and to build and to fight, and with that maybe he kept the angle, but he created something entirely new. So
well, it's the same theme, a running person, but completely different expression.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to tell people what to do in slogans anymore. But it's not only the symbol or the poster, it's the entire event receives attention in various points, in the medals, in programs, tickets. That was the 9th Maccabiah, the 10th Maccabiah. Again, a new expression, a new way of doing of medals. Another very powerful poster. We can see the way he transmits an idea. Let's compare it to what was around the street in the billboards. So that for itself was already drawing attention, calling for attention.
Stands out, yes.
That made people go. A very important poster of my dad. At the time, it was used in rallies to in Europe to call for the release of Jews from the Soviet Union. They had a great impact then, and they still are today part of graphic design history. This is Nastan Sharansky. My dad presents him, gives him
The Iron
copy of a book.
Curtain Days.
Again, social issues, historic issues. When the Soviet Union broke, the Red Star broke into pieces in a shape that suggests the fascist, the neo-fascist, the anti-Semitic undercurrents in Russian society. So he asked, is it again coming back? A call for peace. And other global issues, both of them from different periods, about nuclear issues. Chernobyl, anti-proliferation, and then a call to help the people of Fukushima. When it comes to Israel politics, there's, well, before that, another social issue. The work is not only beautiful, but sometimes what my dad has to say about it is also very impressive. As you can see here, the person giving is the disabled person. He's the one giving the non-disabled person something, and he suggests everybody can give. It's not one way giving to the disabled. It can work the other way around. They can give us a lot. The Israel Festival, another way of projecting his own vision of freedom, of optimism, how you suggest music, movement in such a way. There are some sketches about the same idea. These are very interesting to go through and see. And then if you remember the Independence Day poster, in the 1970, he wins this poster. There's a letter of recognition about the Independence Day. As you can see, obviously it's very happy, but there are some suggestions here. The menorah stems from barbed wire. That's where the nation came from. And the children, he once wrote that he was associated children coming out of shelters, that they appear here in the tree. Another Independence Day poster official after the Yom Kippur War. The movement Hike to Jerusalem, cross-party. The left and right here are not only tracks, but also political movement from the left and right. Everybody joins together to a march to Jerusalem. This is a very different issue about internal politics, Israel, Palestine, separation. But he doesn't say who's who in the equation. I'll just run through these beautiful posters, kinetic work, his own work for his own exhibition. Something I just have to mention, the Moma Calendar, another playful idea, which has a story, a bit of a history, but that's maybe for another meeting. Endless possibilities. Now, we did want to say something about my dad's work and influence today, working with younger designers. He loved to, whenever somebody came to ask or to be interested in his work, he loved to tell them about it. Here you see the calendars that I showed you before. They're always playful, something to discover, to look through. The Shankar College of Art had a full class course about exploring my dad's work, translated it into new ideas. This group of students made fashion. They took his work, made sketches, and came up with new ideas. He was thrilled to follow their results. So that's fashion. Here he is. He's very engaged. They are fascinated. He loved this type of engagement with more people and young people, bringing his ideas into the tabloids and phones. We're getting to our end soon, aren't we? So it's time to maybe a little come back to some important issues, important works that my dad always, especially in the later years, had very, very important relations to them. The Scrolls of Fire. These are now at the Jewish Museum and Holocaust Memorial Museum in Slovenia. Major project, 52 paintings depicting the history of the nation from the destruction of the temple all the way to today. Another work that comes around, here's a greeting card he was asked to do for the Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion back in '61. He went to Jerusalem, he was in Jerusalem and drew a sketch of the new part of Jerusalem, the new Knesset, the new museum, the Hebrew University. And he came up with this freestyle depiction of the national mountain in Jerusalem where all these institutions reside. They were new at the time. Here you see the Knesset, the Israel Museum, and the Hebrew University. So things come around. Here's the National Library, where one of his archives, part of his archive resides now. There's this work. The work now is part of a permanent exhibition at the Knesset in Jerusalem. Terry, are you with me? Yad Vashem, right across from the Hall of Names. From afar, you can see it's a three-dimensional wall. You can see Yad Vashem from the biblical script right here. And as you approach closer, the visibility, you cannot read it anymore, but you can sense the sense of trauma. And so the letters break up into shape. I think we lost Terry here. She had something to mention about this work in Yad Vashem, about her. And that's another very important work for my dad. I mentioned his father was taken to labor camps, labor units, forced labor units in Hungary. And he had this idea of commemorating them because the Hungarian government would rather not, didn't pay too much attention to it. He was an advisor for the Prime Minister of Hungary about the new Holocaust Museum there, but he suggested or he demanded that they address this part of history. And it was, after a long while, accepted, and his sculpture stands today, memorial for the victim of Hungarian army's forced labor units in Teleki Square, Budapest. For the deportation and annihilation of the Hungarian Jewry, this particular Star of David was his father-in-law. We still have it. And the word says everything, basically. And there it is, the ceremony, the dedication ceremony. My dad with a model. There you are. I think I lost you. So a few more words about recent events. Back to the city of Kanija. Last year, they dedicated a sign for my dad right at the building where he was born. Very intimate. Some of his old friends from school showed up. It was beautiful. A colleague and a friend, Yossi Lemel, sent this homage poster for my dad. It reached all the way to a grand exhibition in Indonesia. It was wonderful. His interpretation and it's nice to see other people and young people's interpretation of my dad's work. He's not here to say what he thinks. Or, I mean, a lot of people approached me and said, oh, I wish I could see, or I'm sure your dad would have something to say about the current events, let's say in Ukraine. How would he express that? We don't know, but I can see it through other people's their idea of my dad. And a very cheerful note, a new project, a huge mural in Jerusalem, an initiative by the young group of designers, Broken Fingers, a Reisinger mural in Jerusalem, depicting, it's their work, their idea. They researched, they looked through works, came up with a number of ideas, and hopefully this will come up and be erected soon, B'Karov B'Yameinu in Jerusalem. Well, that's it. We saw quite a lot. I think we are just a little bit off mark when it comes to time. My dad's work, for those of you who want to keep your research, are at safekeeping at the Israel Museum, the National Library, Center Pompidou. I hope you had some vision, some idea about not only the work, about the person, about his vitality, about his sense of humor, about his enthusiasm about life. That's another one of his projections, his way of expressing things. That's for you. So I welcome you to keep in touch with us here. Engage, share this lecture, contact us. Let's do something together. Some of the posters that you saw, they are available. So there's still plenty to do, plenty to look into, delve into. Maura, it's
Yes,
back to you.
Thank you, Ilan and Terry, also for this amazing presentation of your father's, Dan Reisinger's, tremendous body of work. It's really so impressive, and I'm sure it was hard. I know it was very hard for you to even figure out what to show and what to leave out. There was a question from one of our audience members about, I guess he did work representing the 13 tribes that's in the Diaspora Museum. Is that right?
The work I showed you, the Scrolls of Fire, they were commissioned to the establishment of the Diaspora Museum. And copies of them, serigraph copies, were made in Paris back in 1980. And with some of the copies, we wish to distribute them to other museums around the world, just as the one you saw in in Slovenia. That with this work, the Slovenian government established in the city of Lendava a museum for the Holocaust, with the little bit remains that they had from the Jewish community, together with this work. It's the only Holocaust museum in Slovenia. It's the Slovenian official Holocaust museum. So with other copies, we wish to see them in safekeeping in other museum institutions, Jewish centers. So please contact us about that.
Okay, great. We have a
And
question.
I'm sorry I had to rush through so many works.
Oh, that's okay. You had so much to show. And we have a question about books that you could recommend about your father's work. I know that the Israel Museum did a catalog of the exhibition that they had a few years ago. And you mentioned the monograph that's in Chinese, I think you said.
Right.
Are there others? Is there a monograph also in English other than the catalog of the exhibition at the Israel Museum, or other books you could recommend?
Did we get disengaged?
No,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. Did you
Okay.
turn your camera
Here.
off?
Yeah. Yes. So the exhibition catalog is available in English and Hebrew, but you would have to contact the museum probably, or us for the English copy. There's a monograph in Russian for those of you who speak Russian, but you just have to search for it. And these are the main 2, 3, 4 monographs.
I see. Okay.
Dozens of other books quoted.
All right. Well, maybe if people want to research more or know about other books, they can contact you, and we
Sure.
will send everyone in a follow-up
We hope
email
you-
contact information for Elon and also for Terry. And I had a question actually about the lettering. His work with hand lettering was so amazing, and wondering if any actual fonts, typefaces have been created based on his lettering.
No.
No,
Mhm.
okay. And also, I know I'm aware of some efforts to do a combined Hebrew and Arabic lettering for signs and logos, and wonder if that might be influenced by your father's, I would imagine, his early efforts to combine English and Hebrew lettering.
Right.
Do you
Well, I don't think he combined them absolutely together, although some logo forms and type forms are really a combination of both languages, but not as a type. About the Hebrew Arabic, yes, I heard about this project about a young student who wished to disseminate the Arabic language and font into the Israel.
Sorry, Ilan. Many students are trying to do it because it's like it's a necessity and it's not there, and we're trying to do it, and at the moment it's not yet very successful. Even this project that Ilan mentioned, it's working only on some words, but it's not working on other words. So it's not correct yet. We still have a long way to go with it, but it's a necessity because there are Arab students and people who believe in peace. So we need this Arabic Hebrew or Hebrew Arabic type combined together.
Okay.
So this is a nice question for Israeli students and designers.
And then we have 1 minute left. There was a question about his influence on the Israeli design scene today. And clearly there are young designers who are learning from him and his style. Can you name a few names of younger designers that we might want to pay attention to look at their work? You mentioned Yossi Lemel, Ilan, or maybe others.
There are so many. I don't think. I mean, Yossi Lemel's work is a bit like more advertising than what Dan do. I think Dan's work, even though his commercial work, there was something very artistic about Dan's work, whereas Yossi Lemel's work is more like, I'd say not gimmicky, but more like for advertising or for things like this. Young designers, there are so many, and it will be very difficult to mention one or two because maybe their work is very different, but there is something about Dan's legacy that is always there, and even the use of bright colors sometimes bring us back to Dan's portfolio. So it's very hard to say. But for instance, Ilan showed it. Broken Fingers are one of the leading and brilliant and most famous group of graffiti designers. They are based here in Haifa. They are like four group members, and they are based here in Haifa, but they are active all over the world. They are invited and painting walls all over the world, and it is so touching and exciting to see that they understood the importance of Dan's work, and they took it to the next level and make a mural out of it. Amazing, really. They are hip and up to date, and it's I think the best example for taking it.
Well, that might be a great point to end on. Ilan, is there any last word?
Well, I wish to end it on an upper note, upbeat with their work, which is the next generation, the things to come and to look forward to. A lot of students come and ask and publish or write articles. So that's lovely to be in touch with them and to really see their enthusiasm about discovering things that great things already happened here, and there's still a lot to do. Okay. But with this group, certainly they are, as Terry said, they are cutting edge. You should look up there.
Thank you so much. I think we've come to the end of our time, but I want to thank you again, Ilan and Terry, for your wonderful presentations. And a quick note, the Nazarian Center, our last program for spring quarter will be a talk on a totally different subject about the Islamic movement in Israel, and that's on May 25th. And if you're anyone who's interested, you can find more information on the Nazarian Center website, and also on our website, find out about other activities of the Nazarian Center. So thank you so much for joining us, and everyone have a good afternoon or evening, wherever.
Morning, afternoon, evening, and night.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.